Marta could feel the weight of the badge on her chest. It wasn't just the metal pressing against her body, but the significance it carried as the only black woman in the police department in that small town. She had always known that her career choice would be a challenge, but she hadn't expected the hostility to be so constant and silent. The sidelong glances, the whispered comments, the veiled jokes. It was like walking on a thin line, balancing between duty and frustration. That morning, when Marta walked into the police station, she noticed an unusual murmur among the officers. The radio was louder than usual, and there was a tension in the air, almost palpable. She approached her shift colleague, Carlos, and asked what was going on. He shrugged, but the wry smile that appeared on his face put her on alert. A few minutes later, the police chief, Captain Almeida, entered the room, his face contorted in concern. "Attention, everyone," Almeida shouted, his voice filling the space. "We had an incident during the early hours of the morning. A young black man was approached by our men and ended up hospitalized. We are dealing with the situation." Marta felt a chill run down her spine. She knew exactly what those words meant. She had seen it before. The incidents always involved black men and ended with no clear answers, as if their lives were worth less. She knew the protocol. She knew that every officer there would do their best to cover up any mistake. Later, in the locker room, Marta was approached by Captain Almeida. He looked at her with a seriousness that disconcerted her. "Marta, I need you to take care of a report. We need today's incident to look." He hesitated for a moment, controlled, without too many complications. The request made her take a deep breath. It was a line she had never thought of crossing. Standing there, breathing heavily, Marta realized she was about to make the most difficult decision of her life. Marta looked at Captain Almeida, feeling the weight of his words echo in her head like distant thunder. "Controlled," he had said, but she knew exactly what that meant. Throughout her career, she had encountered similar situations where the truth was twisted to protect the reputation of the police. This time, however, the situation seemed different. The young man was seriously injured, and news of it was already starting to circulate on social media. "Captain, with all due respect, I think we need to be transparent about what happened," Marta said, trying to keep her voice steady. Almeida stared at her coldly, his expression hardening. "Transparent? Marta, we know how these things work. We need to protect the department. Think about your career, your position here." Marta felt a lump in her throat. The memory of her mother's face, always worried about her safety, flashed through her mind. "Be strong," she always said. But how could she be strong when justice seemed such a distant concept? Ignoring the discomfort in her stomach, Marta made a decision. "I can't do that, Captain," he replied firmly. "I'm not going to cover anything up. I'm going to investigate the case." Almeida's face darkened. He took a step back, as if assessing the size of the threat she posed. "As you wish, Marta, but know that this may not end well for you." Later, at her desk, Marta began reviewing the incident reports. The inconsistencies were obvious. Witnesses gave conflicting stories, and security camera footage showed the young man being approached aggressively. Marta decided she needed to investigate on her own. She spent the night reviewing documents, making notes, reconstructing the scenario in her mind. She knew her decision would put her in the crosshairs of her colleagues, but she was determined to find the truth. This was about more than just work. It was about her integrity, her identity, and the future of many young people like the one in the hospital now. The next morning, Marta left early to visit the hospital. When she arrived, she saw the young man's mother sitting in the waiting room, her face drawn with despair. Marta approached, feeling the weight of responsibility increase with each step. When the woman looked up, full of pain and fear, Marta knew she was on the right path, and that there was no turning back. Marta approached the young man's mother at the hospital, trying to appear confident, even though her heart was beating fast in her chest. The woman looked up wearily, assessing Marta with a mixed expression of hope and distrust. After a few moments of silence, she finally spoke. "Are you from the police?" the woman asked in a dry tone. "Yes, I am, ma'am. My name is Marta. I want to help you find out what happened to your son," he said, choosing each word carefully. "I know you may have reasons not to trust me, but I need your help to understand what happened." The young man's mother looked at Marta, hesitating for a moment, and then burst into silent tears. She told how her son, Marcos, a boy of just 17, had been violently accosted by the police the night before. There was no justification, no crime, just an unfair suspicion based on nothing more than the color of his skin. Marta felt the woman's pain as if it were her own. When she left the hospital, her determination grew stronger. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. When she returned to the police station, she noticed that the stairs were even heavier than usual. Harsh words awaited her in the hallway. "Are you on their side now, Marta?" said one of the police officers in a mocking tone. She ignored it, but each comment felt like a knife. Marta began to analyze the incident report in more detail, cross-referencing information with other sources. She found several gaps, missing crucial testimonies, obvious omissions, and an edited video. It was clear that there had been an effort to hide the truth. That same night, Marta sought out Joaquim, a childhood friend who had become a community activist. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a safe place where they could talk without interruption. "I knew you would come to me sooner or later, Marta," said Joaquim with a sad smile. "You always had a fair heart. I need your help, Joaquim. This case is wrong, and if I do it alone, I won't be able to do it." Joaquim agreed to help. He suggested that they dig deeper, talk to witnesses, and gather more evidence to make their case. As they talked, Marta felt the weight of the decision she had made, but she also found strength in the support of someone who believed in her. When Marta returned to the police station the next day, she knew she was in for a much bigger fight than she had expected. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was doing the right thing. The air in the precinct felt thicker that morning. Marta could feel the gazes of her colleagues weighing on her back as she walked down the hallway. Every step she took felt like she was marching toward an imminent battle. She knew she was getting closer to something big, something that could change her life forever. In the office, Marta locked herself in with the documents and notes she had gathered with Joaquim's help. They had found 2 witnesses who were present during the incident and who had not been interviewed by the police. One of them had recorded a complete video with her cell phone, without any cuts, clearly showing the violent and unjustified approach by the police. With the new evidence in hand, Marta went to Captain Almeida. She knew she needed to confront him directly before deciding what to do. "Captain, we need to talk," he began firmly. "I have new evidence about Marcos's case. Witnesses who were not interviewed and a video that completely contradicts the official report." Almeida's face hardened. He closed the door behind him and stared at Marta with cold eyes. "Is that an accusation, Marta?" he replied, his voice low and threatening. "This is a call for justice," Marta replied. "We need to do the right thing and reopen the investigation." Almeida approached her, his gaze becoming even more penetrating. "Marta, do you have any idea what you're doing? You're putting your entire career at risk. You're putting your own life at risk." Marta felt the gravity of his words, but she didn't look away. "I know what I'm doing, Captain. I'm doing my job." Captain Almeida sighed in frustration and took a step back. "If you persist in this, you will be suspended immediately, Marta. And I can assure you that your career here will be over." She knew this was the point of no return. With trembling hands but a firm heart, Marta made her choice. "If that's what needs to happen, so be it. I'm going to take this evidence to the press," he declared, "and I'm going to make sure the truth comes out." Hours later, Marta handed the documents over to a local reporter known for covering racial injustice. That same day, news spread quickly. The scandal hit the city like a tidal wave. The truth that Marta had exposed could no longer be hidden. That night, as she listened to the protesters shouting in the street, she felt a mixture of fear and relief. She was suspended, as predicted, but her act of courage had begun to awaken the city. The days following the scandal were filled with growing tension. Marta's suspension had been met with outrage from the community. The local press, spurred on by the material she had leaked, continued to expose discriminatory practices and abuses of power within the police department. Spontaneous protests began to erupt in the streets, demanding change and accountability. Marta stood her ground, even under intense pressure. She received threatening phone calls, and some colleagues shunned her as if she were a traitor. But she also felt the pull of something new, a budding solidarity. The black community, which had initially been wary of her position as a police officer, now saw her as an ally. And for the first time, Marta felt like she was in the right place. Days later, an official investigation was announced by the state government. Pressure from the media and protests had forced a response. Captain Almeida and other officers involved in the cover-up were removed from their posts. The internal proceedings had brought to light a series of irregularities and abuses that had long been hidden. The police department now faced an urgent need for reform. In the midst of all this, Marta was called back to work. When she returned to the police station, she found the environment still hostile, but there was something different on the faces of some of her colleagues, perhaps a spark of respect or even admiration. She knew that not everyone had changed, but she felt that her presence there now had a new meaning. That same afternoon, Marta organized the first of many community forums, an attempt to create a safe space for dialogue between police and citizens. Joaquim and other community leaders were there, along with some of the few officers who had supported Marta throughout the crisis. They discussed difficult issues, racism, abuse of power, trust, and Marta saw that there was still a long way to go. But for the first time, she believed that change was possible. When the meeting ended, Marta stood before everyone, her heart full. The struggle was far from over, but there was new hope, a new beginning. "This is just the beginning," she said with a determined smile. "We will continue fighting, together." And at that moment, amidst applause and words of support, Marta knew she had found her true purpose, to be the voice of those who, for so long, had been silenced.